It was supposed to be the most ordinary of days. A class trip to North Glen Nature Preserve, miles of pine-scented forest, soft dirt trails, and the quiet rustle of old leaves curling underfoot. 32 students from Willow Creek Elementary climbed off the yellow school bus, their bright backpacks bouncing, voices chattering with excitement. It was the kind of outing that happened every year. Predictable, safe. Except this time, one of them never came back. By 10:43 a.m., head counts were short by one. 9-year-old Emma Whitlock, brown ponytail, shy smile, quiet as a cloud, was gone. No one had seen her leave the trail. No one had noticed her wander. And no one heard a scream. The panic started small. Maybe she just stopped to tie her shoe or wandered to the restrooms near the visitor center. But the longer they looked, the quieter the woods felt. By noon, search crews were called in. By 3 p.m., state troopers were combing the underbrush. By nightfall, her face was already on the evening news. And then the footage surfaced. North Glen Preserve had recently installed a set of wildlife cameras near one of the lesser-used paths. The ranger's office had them mostly for capturing deer migration or the occasional wandering coyote. But the footage from 10:31 a.m., a time when Emma had still been accounted for, showed something chilling, grainy, hard to make out, but undeniable. Emma walking off the trail, and a large German shepherd, muddy,
colorless,
wild-eyed, approaching her from behind. Then in a moment frozen in blurred pixels, the dog seized her backpack in its teeth and dragged her into the woods. No scream, no struggle, just a silent, chilling vanishing act. The clip lasted only 7 seconds, and in those 7 seconds, the entire town of Ellison Ridge was turned upside down. Parents kept their children indoors. The forest was closed to the public, and a question, unspoken but heavy on everyone's hearts, hung over the community like fog. Was Emma still alive? And why? Would a dog take her? Now, before we dive into what happened next, pause for a moment and really think, what would make a dog, seemingly wild, drag a little girl into the forest? Not attack, not maul, but pull her away? Some said it had to be trained. Others feared the worst. But what the town didn't know, what no one could have imagined, is that this dog wasn't a threat at all. He was her only chance. Emma Whitlock was not like most 9-year-olds. She didn't care for noisy birthday parties or the dizzy swirl of fairground rides. She liked quiet things. Rain on the roof, the rustle of pine needles, the hush of her bedroom when the window was open, just a crack. Some kids collected stickers or plastic toys. Emma collected sounds, tiny ones. She carried a notebook in her backpack, labeled Forest Voices. Each page was filled with little sketches and scribbles. Twig snap our deer, wind whistling gut storm, that deep thump heard a fox, maybe. While the other kids laughed and chattered along the trails that morning, Emma had walked at the back, a little apart. She wasn't being disobedient, she was listening. That's why she heard it. It wasn't loud, not at first. A low, strained whimper, just off the trail. A sound she couldn't place. Emma stopped walking. Behind her, the class kept moving, rounding the bend ahead. Their teacher was too far to hear her call, if she shouted. But Emma didn't shout. She stepped off the trail. 1, 2, 3 steps into the ferns. That's when she saw him. The dog. He was enormous, at least to Emma. A German shepherd with deep rust-colored fur, dusted in dirt, a scar slashed across his side, and eyes that looked like something from a war story. Haunted, wild, but pleading. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He whined. One paw lifted, then limped back down again. He was hurt. Emma looked at the dog, then back toward the trail. She could still hear the others laughing in the distance. But the dog took a step away, then another, then stopped. He looked back at her. It wasn't random. He wanted her to follow. Emma did. What happened next, what the grainy footage didn't show, was that the dog didn't pull her. Not at first. He walked with her, slowly, limping through the underbrush, leading her further into the trees, until Emma tripped. A root caught her ankle. She fell forward, landing hard. her backpack tangled around her arm. The dog turned sharply, his ears alert. He paced back to her. Then he did something strange. He didn't sniff or nudge her. He bit her backpack strap gently and pulled. Not hard, not rough. He was trying to help her up. But to the wildlife camera pointed at that spot, from that exact angle, it looked like something else entirely. A dog dragging a child away. The video didn't show the way she stood up afterward. Didn't capture the way she whispered, "Okay, I'm coming," and followed him willingly. Didn't show the most important detail of all, the second cry that had come through the trees just before Emma fell. It hadn't come from the dog. It came from something deeper in the woods. Something small and in pain. And so the real question isn't why the dog took her. It's what or who he was taking her to. Sheriff Dale Mercer had been in law enforcement for 34 years, but nothing about this case made sense to him. He'd seen his share of runaways, even a few abductions back in the 90s, but a dog dragging a child into the forest on a school trip? It sounded like something out of a tabloid. Still, by the time he reached North Glen Preserve that afternoon, the search crews were already combing the woods, and parents were crying into Sherpa blankets in the ranger's office. The girl's mother, Rebecca Whitlock, stood near the trailhead, arms crossed tight, her face pale with dread, and a single word repeating in her throat. "Emma, Emma, Emma." Sheriff Mercer didn't waste time. He requested the full trail camera footage and had the path sealed off. He noticed something immediately: the angle of the clip. The camera wasn't high, more like waist level. It had been set there weeks earlier to capture small game for conservation logs. The footage was fuzzy and brief, but Emma didn't look terrified. No thrashing, no visible resistance. Still, protocol was protocol. They had to assume the worst: a missing child, an unidentified dog, and nearly 5 hours lost already. Search and rescue fanned out with dogs, drones, and thermal scopes. But by sunset, they had nothing. No footprints, no torn clothing, no fresh leads. That's when Mercer made the call to bring in Frankie Baird, a retired canine handler who now volunteered with canine search efforts. Frankie, thin as wire and as gruff as dried bark, brought his best dog, a sleek golden retriever named Midge, trained in both scent and recovery. They started where Emma was last seen, letting Midge sniff her hoodie. The dog's ears twitched, nose dipped low, then she bolted, straight off the main trail, deep into the hollows behind the preserve. Areas even the rangers barely entered. Frankie followed, calling back, "She's got something, come on." 20 minutes later, they found the first real clue. Not Emma, but prints, small shoe impressions, maybe a child's, pressed into soft earth. And next to them, deep paw prints, German Shepherd likely, fresh. Then something even stranger, a broken branch with fabric snagged on it, pink and white, a thread from a backpack strap. But here's where it got peculiar. The tracks didn't wander aimlessly. They were moving in a pattern, intentional, leading somewhere, and nearby, Midge began to whine. Frankie crouched beside her and saw it. A trail of disturbed leaves and moss, almost like someone had cleared the way. "Sheriff," he called. "You're not going to believe this." Mercer stepped over. Frankie's flashlight hovered over the next discovery. A clean, bone-dry plastic water bottle, placed upright, not discarded, not tossed. As if it had been set down carefully, Mercer's stomach turned over. Someone or someone was leaving a path, but for whom? And back in the forest, Emma kept following the dog. Each step deeper, each rustle louder, her notebook clutched tight in her hand. She had no idea that behind her, the whole town was starting to panic. But Emma, she wasn't afraid. Not yet, because just ahead, faint and high and desperate, she heard it again. A cry. Small, weak. This wasn't just about the dog anymore. There was someone else out there. The woods had grown darker. Though it was barely mid-afternoon, dense branches overhead wove together like a ceiling, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Emma's shoes sank into damp earth, and her little legs were tiring. But she kept going. The dog trotted ahead with a purpose, his limp slowing him now and then. but never stopping him. Emma had started calling him Shadow. He didn't seem to mind. She tried talking to him, softly. "Are you leading me somewhere? Is someone hurt?" He didn't respond, just kept moving. Then he stopped, ears pricked. Emma followed his gaze. Ahead, a massive pine tree had fallen across a small dip in the forest. The trunk was old, hollow in the middle, split wide near the roots. And there, barely visible from the trail, was movement. Emma tiptoed forward and froze. A baby, no older than 6 or 7 months, swaddled in a tattered blue blanket, curled beneath the shelter of the log, cheeks dirty, eyelids fluttering, whimpering, just barely. Her heart skipped. She dropped to her knees. "Shadow, you brought me to a baby." The German shepherd sat beside her, watching with those deep amber eyes, like a sentry. Emma looked around. There was no one else. No stroller, no diaper bag, no signs of a parent, just that baby. Lying in the dirt, wrapped in silence, she gently touched the child's hand. It was cold, but he was alive. Emma reached into her backpack for the emergency granola bar the school nurse had packed just in case. She opened it, broke off a soft piece, and touched it to the baby's lips. He didn't eat, but he blinked at her, and that was enough. The tears started to come then, not from fear, but from confusion. "Who leaves a baby here?" she whispered. The dog looked away, then barked. Once, loud, urgent. A squirrel scattered up a tree in the distance. The forest answered with silence. Emma wiped her eyes. She looked back toward the way they had come. It was thick with brush. She couldn't go back alone. Couldn't carry a baby, not that far. She needed help. But the dog, Shadow, didn't look like he was finished. He stood up again, started walking, then stopped and looked back. He wanted her to follow again, but now she had to make a decision. Stay with the baby or trust the dog a little further? She looked at the child, then at Shadow, then did something bold for a 9-year-old girl. She wrapped the baby in her jacket, nestled him into her backpack, and slung it on her front, holding it like a sling. "I'm not leaving him," she told the dog, "but I'll come." Shadow seemed to understand. He turned and led her deeper still. Back at the ranger station, a new theory was forming. Sheriff Mercer sat at a table littered with maps, footage stills, and notes. Search teams were still circling, but now the FBI had joined in, and someone finally made a connection. "Sir," said Agent Pratt, flipping open a thin file, "you might want to see this." It was an old missing persons report from 3 months prior. A woman named Lydia Turn had disappeared during a hike in these very woods. The only clue they'd found? An empty stroller at the trailhead. No signs of a child. No body. Just a dog bowl. And a note that said, "He'll protect what I couldn't." Sheriff Mercer sat back in his chair. His hand moved slowly to the still frame from the footage, the one with the German shepherd pulling Emma's backpack. He whispered, "What in the world is going on out there?" And somewhere deep in the forest, Emma, now cradling someone else's baby, kept walking toward a truth that no adult could have seen coming. Because sometimes the forest keeps secrets, and sometimes it sends a protector. Emma's legs were trembling now. Her shoes were soaked, and pine needles clung to her jeans like burrs. But her grip on the baby never loosened. She held him tight, whispering soft nonsense, the way her mother had once whispered to her during storms. "Almost there. You're okay, little guy." Shadows showing us the way. The German shepherd glanced back at her, tail swaying low, his gait slowing to match hers. The scar on his side had reopened, a thin trickle of blood along his ribs. But he didn't whimper. He pushed on, driven by something deeper than instinct. Suddenly, Shadow stopped. They'd reached a mossy outcrop, hidden behind a curtain of fallen branches. From a distance, it looked like nothing. But up close, Emma could see it. A gap in the rocks. A cave, not deep, but dry and wide enough to crawl into, almost like someone had carved it out. Inside, just beyond the threshold, was something astonishing. Blankets, tins of food, a flashlight. Someone had lived here. Shadow stepped inside first, nosed a corner, then lay down slowly with a groan. Emma ducked in after him, still cradling the baby. The air smelled like earth and pine and something faintly metallic, blood or time. She eased the baby onto the softest patch of blanket she could find. He whimpered, blinked, and then finally dozed off. Shadow, breathing heavily now, lifted his head to look at her. Now that's when she saw it, tied loosely around his neck. Beneath the muddy fur, a collar. She leaned closer. It was worn, barely readable, but one word still remained clear. Buddy. Your name's not Shadow, Emma whispered. It's Buddy. The dog wagged his tail once. Slowly, she reached forward, gently touching his side where the blood had started to crust. His ribs heaved under her hand. Then something shifted in the dog's eyes. He wasn't just a stray. He had been waiting for someone to understand. And somehow, he had chosen her. Back at the command post, the situation was turning desperate. Sheriff Mercer had received 2 calls from media outlets, one from Washington, one from Toronto. A child lost in the woods was tragic enough, but a mysterious dog abducting her. The story had taken on a life of its own. I want boots in every hollow by sundown. He barked into the radio. I don't care if it's private property. I want that child found. He hung up and turned to Agent Pratt, who was still combing through reports. That hiker, the mother, Lydia Turn. You said she vanished with a baby? Pratt nodded. Never found her. Just the note and the dog bowl. The search at the time was shallow. Bad weather, sparse leads. Everyone assumed she got lost and, you know. What about the baby? Never found. Assumed perished. Mercer frowned. Unless... Pratt's eyes narrowed. You think the baby survived? Not alone, Mercer said, tapping the still frame of the dog. But maybe, not alone. In the hollowed-out cave, Emma reached into her backpack, pulling out her little notebook. She turned to the next blank page and wrote, Buddy found a baby, took care of him, waiting for help. He's hurt, but he's a good dog, the best dog. I think he's saved someone's life before. Now maybe mine. The baby stirred in his sleep. Emma looked at the sky. Through the cave's narrow opening, the light was starting to fade. And suddenly, for the first time all day, she felt afraid. Buddy, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Are they going to find us? The dog didn't answer, but in his silence, there was a kind of peace. Because even if the forest seemed endless, she wasn't alone. And help was coming if they could just hold out a little longer. By nightfall, the woods changed completely. What was quiet and calm in daylight now crackled with tension. Wind picked up through the trees like an unseen hand rustling the world. Branches creaked, leaves danced erratically, and above it all, the sky turned a cold, gunmetal gray. Sheriff Mercer stood at the forest edge, his radio crackling in and out. Units 6 through 9, report your zones. Static, then a tired voice. Nothing in Sector 3. No prints, no fabric, just more woods. He pinched the bridge of his nose. It had been almost 10 hours since Emma vanished. The temperature was dropping. If she didn't have shelter, where's that canine handler? He snapped. A ranger pointed. Frankie just got back in. Dog's tired. Picked up some weak scent. In the eastern ridge, but they lost it in the wind. Mercer turned to him. Did she have a jacket? Just a school windbreaker. Nothing warm. He swore under his breath. We're running out of time. Just then, a woman pushed through the perimeter tape. Pale, shaking, eyes wide with something more than panic. It was Emma's mother, Rebecca. I heard a report. Someone saw tracks. We're checking all leads, Mercer said gently. We're not giving up. But she wasn't listening. She pulled something from her coat pocket. A small, battered silver whistle. She always wears this, she said, voice breaking. A safety whistle on a lanyard. I gave it to her when she was 6. She held it out. The cord was broken, found snagged, in the brambles near the trail fork. Mercer took it carefully. His voice dropped. She dropped this? Rebecca nodded. He looked at the whistle, then out into the trees. They were close. He could feel it. Far inside the forest, Emma had made a fire. Not a big one, just a little flicker of warmth. Using the survival matches tucked in her backpack, part of a hiking badge kit her aunt had given her on her birthday. She'd always carried it, just in case. Tonight was that case. Buddy lay near the opening of the cave, ears twitching at every sound. He hadn't left her side once. The baby stirred. Emma held him closer. She was whispering again, soft, calm, brave. "You're gonna be okay, little one. You're warm now. You're safe." Buddy found us a good place. Then she froze. Outside the cave, a sound. Crunch. Twigs snapping. Buddy lifted his head sharply, growled low. Emma's heart raced. Was it a coyote? A bear? She held the baby tighter and ducked lower behind Buddy's back. Then a whistle, very faint, far off. 3 short bursts. Buddy stood. He took 2 steps toward the sound. Emma sat up, eyes wide. That's a signal. That's someone calling. She scrambled to her feet, hurried toward the mouth of the cave. "Buddy, should we go?" The dog hesitated, then bolted straight toward the sound. Emma followed. Branches whipped at her arms. Mud soaked her socks. But she didn't care. She just ran. For the first time all day, she wanted to be found. 2 searchers were combing the western bend of the forest when they saw it. A blur of rust-colored fur charging through the ferns. Then behind it, a girl, hair wild, jacket missing, cradling something in her arms. "Hey, hey!" one shouted. Racing forward, Emma stumbled and fell into him. She clutched the baby tightly. The man looked down and gasped. "Get the sheriff," he called. "Now! We found her!" 10 minutes later, Sheriff Mercer watched as the EMTs loaded Emma and the baby into the back of a van. A medic draped a warm foil blanket around her shoulders and tried to coax a juice box into her hand. The baby was quiet, eyes open. Buddy sat beside the ambulance, flanked by officers who didn't know what to do with him. The sheriff approached slowly. Emma looked up. "I told you," she said, voice hoarse. "He's a good dog." Mercer looked at the blood on Buddy's side, the wear in his eyes, the gentle way he leaned toward the girl. And for once, the old lawman had no words, just a lump in his throat. The hospital was a quiet hum of fluorescent lights and shuffling feet. Emma was tucked into a warm bed, the baby in the next room, under close watch by a pediatric team. Nurses moved gently, whispering, as if afraid to break the miracle that had just unfolded. Sheriff Mercer stood in the hallway with Agent Pratt, the recovered footage looping again on the monitor beside them. Buddy, the dog, had returned to his post, just outside the glass doors, refusing to come inside. "You know what's strange?" Pratt asked, folding his arms. "This dog, Buddy, they ran him through the shelter database. He's chipped." Mercer turned, surprised. "Someone owned him?" "Yeah, owner was Lydia Turn." Mercer blinked. "The woman who went missing. With the baby?" Pratt nodded. "Turns out she was a veterinary nurse. Volunteer with wilderness search teams. That dog was trained." Mercer exhaled. It all clicked. She must have trained him to protect the baby before she... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "And the child?" Mercer asked. "DNA confirms it. The baby Emma found is Lydia's son, missing for 3 months. Unbelievable he survived." Mercer looked through the glass toward Emma. "She didn't just survive," he said. "She saved someone else." Inside the hospital room, Emma was wide awake. She couldn't sleep. She held a stuffed rabbit the nurse had given her, and her eyes kept flicking toward the door where Buddy had last stood. Her mother sat beside her, brushing fingers through her tangled hair. "You scared me," Rebecca said softly. "I had to go," Emma replied. "He needed me." Rebecca didn't argue. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sheriff Mercer entered slowly, holding a folder. "We found something," he said. He handed Emma a faded photo, slightly bent at the edges. It was a woman with kind eyes, kneeling beside a younger Buddy, her arms wrapped around him. Behind her, a stroller. Emma stared. "That's her," she whispered. "I think that's the baby's mom." Mercer nodded. She left him in Buddy's care, and he didn't stop protecting him, not for a second. Rebecca's eyes shimmered, and now Emma did exactly what he did, Mercer said. "I found someone who couldn't survive alone." and made sure he did. Outside the hospital, Buddy lay curled on the sidewalk, under a street lamp. He wouldn't come in, no matter how many times staff tried. It wasn't defiance, it was duty. Then the glass doors slid open. Emma stepped out, wrapped in a sweater 2 sizes too big, her hair damp from the bath. Hospital slippers flapping against the concrete. Buddy lifted his head. She sat down beside him on the cold bench. "You're not a stray," she said quietly. "You're a hero." Buddy rested his muzzle on her knee. She stroked behind his ears, slow and steady. "Do you still miss her, Lydia?" The dog gave no sound, but something in his eyes answered. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out her notebook. The last page she had written was already full. She turned it over and started a new one. "Today I met a dog who saved a baby, and then saved me. I think we saved each other." She looked at Buddy. "I want to go home," she said softly, "but I want you to come too." The next morning, the town of Ellison Ridge woke to a headline that didn't sound real. "Lost girl found alive with missing infant and loyal dog in remote forest shelter." The story rippled through breakfast tables, barber shops, nursing homes, and quiet kitchen radios. Folks who'd spent their whole lives believing in routine and common sense were now leaning forward, eyes wide, hearts full. "At Grady's diner," someone whispered. "She followed the dog on purpose." At the post office, a woman murmured, "That girl's braver than half the men I know." And at the church, Pastor Hall included Emma in his morning prayer, calling her the shepherd who followed the shepherd. Everyone had their own version. Some called it fate, others a miracle. But one thing united them all. For the first time in years, Ellison Ridge felt alive again. At the hospital, Emma was cleared for release by noon. The baby, now officially identified as Caleb Turn, was transferred to a foster care unit, pending next of kin. But he wasn't alone for long. Rebecca Whitlock, Emma's mother, had already begun paperwork to apply for temporary guardianship. "We'll keep him safe," she said firmly. "For Lydia, for Buddy." Emma smiled at that. And as for Buddy, well, Buddy hadn't left Emma's side. When it came time to go home, she simply held out her hand, and he followed. No leash, no command, just a quiet understanding between two souls who had seen something most people never would. Sheriff Mercer stood at the edge of the hospital parking lot, watching as they drove off. "Think that dog knew exactly what he was doing," Frankie Baird muttered beside him. Mercer nodded slowly. "You believe animals grieve?" Frankie rubbed his jaw. "Grieve? Sheriff, some of them never stop. But the best ones, they take that grief and turn it into protection, into loyalty." He paused. "Into love." Mercer watched as Buddy leaned his head out the back window, the wind ruffling his fur. "He carried her memory," Mercer said, "all the way to another child." That night, as rain pattered gently against the roof of the Whitlock home, Emma sat by her bedroom window, with Buddy curled at her feet. The stuffed bunny rested on her lap. Her notebook was open again, and this time, she wasn't writing for school or for herself. She was writing for Lydia. "Dear Miss Lydia, I met your son. He's small but strong, just like Buddy. I think you knew he'd survive. If you gave him the right guardian, you were right. He did. And I'll keep writing. I'll keep listening. I'll remember you. And your boy will too." She closed the notebook. Buddy raised his head at the sound and rested it gently against her knee. Outside, the trees swayed. The wind whispered. And far above them all, the forest, so full of silence and mystery, felt for once like a place that held answers. 2 weeks passed. Emma returned to school, but everything felt different now. The whispers in the hallway weren't mocking. They were reverent. Children who barely spoke to her before now stared with quiet awe. Her desk was covered in hand-drawn cards. Some read, "You're brave." Others just had scribbled hearts and stick-figured dogs. But Emma didn't want fame. She wanted quiet. She wanted Buddy. Luckily, the school agreed. Principal Henderson, a stern man who rarely bent the rules, had one look at the German shepherd, curled beside Emma's desk, and simply nodded. If that dog can handle a forest rescue, he can handle third-grade math. So Buddy came to school each day, lying beside her chair, head on his paws, eyes watching every door. And when recess came, Emma didn't run to the swings anymore. She sat under the old oak tree with Buddy and read aloud from her notebook. They were writing something together now, a story about a dog who waited and a girl who listened. At home, life took on a new rhythm. Baby Caleb had settled into the Whitlock household, like he'd always belonged. He cried at night, giggled at shadows, and reached for Emma every time she passed. And Buddy, he guarded Caleb, like he had in the forest. He slept beside the crib, walked beside the stroller. And when Caleb cried, it was Buddy who nuzzled the blankets, letting out soft whines, until the baby calmed. Rebecca Whitlock would sometimes stop in the hallway, just to watch them. The girl, the dog, and the child who wasn't hers, but had become hers in every way that mattered. "I don't know what brought you to her," she once whispered to Buddy, "but thank you." Buddy blinked at her, and then licked her hand. One evening, Emma received a letter. It was from the Turn family, distant relatives of Lydia, who had been searching for her for months. They had seen the news story, taken a DNA test, confirmed the bloodline. They were willing to adopt Caleb. Rebecca sat with the letter in her lap for a long time. Emma noticed her mother staring out the window. "Are they going to take him away?" she asked. Rebecca looked at her daughter's worried face, then at the baby. Asleep in the next room, she shook her head. "Not if we fight to keep him." And they did. Letters, meetings, a home study, and eventually a judge. On the day of the hearing, Emma stood nervously, in a too-big dress. Buddy sat beside her, tail thumping softly against the courthouse floor. The judge, a kind woman with silver hair and eyes full of wisdom, looked over the reports. She paused at the photograph, clipped to the top. Emma cradling the baby in the forest cave, Buddy beside her, both of them staring at the camera, like they'd just emerged from a different world. "You found him," the judge said gently. "And he found you." Emma nodded. "And he's not just a baby. He's family now." The judge looked to Rebecca. "Do you wish to pursue permanent guardianship?" "I do," Rebecca said, voice steady. "With all my heart." The judge smiled. "Then may this family, formed by loyalty and love, be forever protected by the law." She signed the papers. Emma squeezed Buddy's fur, and for the first time in days, she smiled wide. Spring came early to Ellison Ridge that year. The air smelled of thawed earth and budding lilacs. Trees swayed with promise, and the woods, once feared for their silence, had become a place of legend, spoken of in hushed tones, over warm coffee and Sunday sermons, not for what had been lost, but for what had been found. Emma, now 10 and a half, walked hand in hand with her mother along the trail at North Glen Preserve. Buddy padded beside her, his gait slower than before, the old scar along his ribs, now just a faint mark against aging fur. In a sling across Rebecca's chest, Caleb gurgled and reached for a passing butterfly. They stopped at the fork in the path, the very place Emma had stepped off the trail that day. A small wooden sign now stood at the spot. It read, "The Guardian's Path, in honor of those who protect without words, and the children who listen with their hearts." People from all over the state had come to hear the story. Hikers brought flowers. Scouts left dog treats. At the base of the sign, parents pointed at the trail and said, "That's where it happened." But Emma never claimed fame. Her story wasn't one of heroism to her. It was one of listening, of trusting, of following, even when no one else understood. Later that afternoon, the Whitlocks gathered on the back porch. The sun hung low, casting golden light across the yard. Caleb was crawling now, determined and wobbly, and Buddy, ever watchful, followed every move. Rebecca brought out lemonade. Emma sat with her notebook open, legs tucked beneath her. "Do you want to read it?" her mom asked gently. Emma nodded. She cleared her throat and began. Once there was a dog who had no home. He waited for someone who couldn't come back. But he didn't leave, not until he found a girl who didn't run away, a girl who listened. And together, they found something more. A baby, a bond, a beginning. Some people say dogs can't speak, but maybe we just haven't learned how to hear them yet. I think Buddy speaks every day. He says, I remember, I protect, I love. She looked up. Rebecca's eyes were full. Buddy stretched out beside them, groaning softly. As he settled into the porch boards, the air was warm, peaceful. Home. Later that night, Emma crept down the stairs. In her pajamas, she found Buddy by Caleb's crib, his chin resting on the edge, watching the boy sleep. Emma knelt beside him. You still miss her, don't you? She whispered. Buddy blinked. She rested her head gently against his. I think she knows, she said, that you kept your promise. The room was still. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a memory. And in that moment, nothing needed to be said. Because sometimes the greatest stories aren't told. They're lived by girls who follow their hearts and dogs who never leave their post.